Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois Associate Editor at the Center Square Newswire Service. This week in Illinois in Focus, we'll discuss a proposal by the Illinois Pollution Control Board to ban most new non-electric vehicle sales in the state by 2035, Governor J.B. Pritzker's call to ban cell phones in classrooms, and tons of legislative activity over the past week. All of that and more when we return for Illinois in Focus.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. The Illinois Pollution Control Board is considering a proposal to ban most new non-electric vehicle sales in the state by 2035. The business community says such a ban, it would hurt job creators and have them moving out of the state. Joining me to discuss this story is the Center Square Illinois reporter Jim Talamonte. Jim, tell us more about what we had happen this week and some of the pushback that there's been from small business owners.
Yeah, Greg, big time pushback. The Illinois Pollution Control Board is getting this proposal from environmental groups, and these groups are pushing for the adoption of California's vehicle emission standards. And, we say most non-electric vehicle sales banned by 2035. It sounds way off, but it's only 10 years away. And so it's going to be interesting if you're thinking about buying a traditional gas-powered car. You might want to do it soon. No, but there were similar proposals a couple of years ago in 2023. They didn't go through, and perhaps part of the reason is just because this is really going to be expensive for not just businesses, but all of us. Noah Finley is the state director for the National Federation of Independent Business here in Illinois, and mainly representing small businesses. And he said 99% of those he surveyed, or his group surveyed, oppose these mandates that are really strict in that, yes, after 2035, you, except with a few exemptions, you wouldn't be able to get a traditional new gas-powered car or light truck. Heavy trucks, it's more complicated, but there would also be real restrictions on trucks and truck tractors, and these are vehicles where the electric industry is behind where it is for smaller vehicles, because just the power required. And you think about, farmers with tractors and snowplow drivers and the amount of time it would take to charge a battery to power those vehicles for any length of time. And you're talking about major costs. And for trucks, Ryder and several other truck groups did studies where they talked about the increased cost to replace their fleets and the charging time and the need to hire new drivers. The cost would just be astronomical. And there would also be utilities who would have to invest money to upgrade grid networks because of all the electricity consumption. So in the name of being green, we would be looking at a lot more electricity consumption because of this. So there are a lot of factors that go into this that would really make it complicated for small businesses. Yes, as the NFIB said, but also for all of us as consumers, because we would talk about an inflation driver. Well, this certainly appears as though it would be that, just to have more electric vehicles and fewer non-electric vehicles.
Well, and you also got to consider rural areas and how, for instance, in Southern Illinois, some people are driving an hour and a half to work and then an hour and a half back. And then to get to the grocery store, it might be 45 minutes to an hour to get to the nearest grocery store. And it's not necessarily as conducive with electric vehicles. I've seen people share your story, Jim, all over the internet. And some of the comments are, well, I'll just buy an electric vehicle from out of the state. So it's interesting to think through what this policy would mean, especially in a state that seems to be surrounded by states that take different approaches to things. So we'll be watching this and following up with what the Pollution Control Board's doing here. Tell us what you know about the next steps.
Well, that's just it. There were hearings this week, and I also talked with a rep from the Illinois Automobile Dealers Association. They also have major concerns about this. So the Pollution Control Board had some hearings in December with people in favor. The hearings this week were more with people who were opposed, and so now they will consider this. And we don't have a specific timeline, but they're, we've heard from both sides, and we don't really know exactly when the control board is going to make recommendations or move forward with a potential proposal or potential legislation.
So we'll keep an eye on that, definitely for some follow-up. Be sure to get the newsletter at thecentersquare.com and get the Illinois page. We're talking with Jim Talamonte with the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop. This is Illinois in Focus. And Jim, we've got several education stories. We'll get to a story that you're working on today, Thursday, when we're recording this, about Governor J.B. Pritzker and some of the state house, members of the House of Representatives, in reference to the Trump administration's moves to possibly roll back the U.S. Department of Education. But you did a story earlier in the week about the cost per student at Chicago Public Schools. Tell us about kind of the range that you found from, the low end, how much it costs per pupil at one school, but then all the way to the high end at another Chicago public school.
Well, the average is right around $20,000 per student that CPS spends, which again is much higher than some other communities in the state. There are some communities that are in that area, but the range is dramatic. There are some, most of the public schools in the Chicago public, in the CPS system, for example, test very poorly when it comes to reading, math, graduation rates, chronic absenteeism, you name a metric, and CPS is failing, as a lot of public schools around the state are. There are some pretty well-performing high schools in CPS that are performing fairly well and are spending below the CPS average. Some of the biggest spenders are some of the worst performers. The most notable, perhaps, is Douglas Academy on the west side, $93,000 per student. And this is a school that has capacity for, I can't remember the number, I think it's several hundred, and was around 35 students last year. And they did not test at grade level. The chronic absenteeism rate, 62%. There are a couple of schools that are actually six-figure schools when it comes to taxpayer spending. There is
that's per pupil. Again, that's
this is
per pupil.
Yes, per taxpayer spending per student. One is at $130,000. It used to be called Camelot Safe Academy. The name has changed, perhaps to distract from that number. It's now Safe Achieve School. This is on the south side. There's another school for young women, which is for women who are young mothers or pregnant, and there is a health clinic on site. There is childcare on site. That one is at just over $100,000 per student. But it's interesting. Safe Achieve Academy. If you drive 5 miles west from there, there is Leo High School. This is a Catholic school, which does not get funded through the city taxpayer dollars. It's a private school. The tuition is $9,300 per year, which is pretty low for a Catholic high school in Chicago. And their graduation rate has been 100% since 2012. Most of the students, over 95%, go to college, but some go into the trades, so go to other areas. And their attendance has gone up from 2021. This is just out of the pandemic. Some of the public schools hadn't reopened yet. They're at 91%. Now they're at 96% for attendance. Well, some of the schools I mentioned, Frederick Douglass Academy, 62% absenteeism, chronic absenteeism rate. So it's pretty remarkable that you have this small school in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. You hear Mayor Brandon Johnson talk about disinvestment. This would be one of his disinvested areas, and yet Mayor Johnson, Governor Pritzker, they won't invest. We had the Invest in Kids scholarship program, right? They won't invest in a scholarship program for non-public schools, which are excelling and even doing it in very challenging environments. And Leo's not the only one, but it's certainly one example of just a humble neighborhood high school that's doing very well and yet not spending 20, 30, 40, $100,000 per student in taxpayer money. It's just the numbers are incredible when you look at the differences, and not just the differences in the financial numbers, but the differences in the academic results, graduation rates, and attendance. It's remarkable.
At the State House, there's been a lot of debate about equity versus excellence. There seems to be this line between Republicans and Democrats in the Education Committee, and how much money taxpayers are going to be spending on that. And should it focus on equity or should it focus on excellence? We're hearing more and more of this. And I think it's only going to ramp up even more, Jim, as a story you're working on today, highlighting that debate and a flashpoint with the Trump administration moving to essentially, from what our understanding is, start dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. Tons of floor speeches on the House floor today about that, and it sparked a bit of back and forth. But this also follows Governor J.B. Pritzker speaking to the Illinois Education Association. What did he have to say today?
Well, the governor has pretty much, since the inauguration of Donald Trump as president, almost every day, there's either been a statement from his office or public comments by him where he's going after the administration. It's just been an attack, and some strong rhetoric at times. We know this during the State of the State address. He referred to Trump followers. He used the word Nazi multiple times. And today it was again attacking the president and the Department of Government Efficiency, cutting education dollars or potentially dismantling or eliminating the Department of Education. He used the word Doge bags, and again, to be insulting. And the rhetoric's been very strong from the governor. He's
just to be clear, you said Doge bags.
Doge, yes, Doge, yes, that was his his nickname. Now he's got a very favorable audience here. He's got the Illinois Education Association, largest, I believe the largest teachers union in the country, actually. And he's speaking to the National Education Association tonight, actually. I believe a virtual remarks he's going to deliver. So he's really going for the teachers union support with these appearances. And but again, he was very he was saying today, he said, we need to fight this. We need to fight back. And someone in the crowd said, fight back. And he says, IEA, Illinois Education Association, are you ready for the fight? Let's go get him. Let's go beat him. So again, it's, almost like we're gearing up for a brawl at the OK Corral here, that the governor is really, really attacking the proposed cuts, reductions, or some would say improved efficiencies by,
and that's the thing. I don't know. Right. And I don't know if we've actually seen what the ultimate outcome is going to be here. Right. Trump during the campaign said that he wanted to get rid of the Department of Education, but give the money back to the states. We haven't really heard from the Trump administration what exactly this is going to look like. And that seems to have given an open to Democrats to take this line of attack against Republicans, saying they're going to cut education funding for people with disabilities. They're going to cut funding for rural schools and such. So, yeah, we'll be watching that and seeing how the governor reacts. But also on the House floor today, you had a debate between State Representative Will Davis, the Democrat leader on the House Education Committee, and also the Republican leader on the House Education Committee, Blaine Wilhauer. They actually spoke two different times. I think Davis actually had 3 bites at the apple because they kept using each other's names in debate.
It was remarkable. And, a couple of weeks ago, there was a committee hearing and there was some real tension between the two of them. You could sense it, that this was coming. And it was Davis talking about equity, Wilhauer talking about excellence, and how what we've been doing here in Illinois isn't working. The test scores show it. And so Davis called out Wilhauer today, and talking about how these cuts are going to affect what we're doing. They're going to, and Wilhauer again. So what the very communities you say you want to uplift, you've destroyed. We had this great program, the Invest in Kids scholarships. Where were you? And he calls out to Davis, "We're hiding under your desk. Is that what you're doing?" And they went back and forth.
I think he said that he was hiding under his desk from the teachers unions that are going to try to make sure that they uphold what the teachers union want.
Right. He said, well, you're more concerned about the teachers union bosses you work for than you are for about getting results for kids. And that was Wilhauer's argument. And then Davis came back. So it was quite a back and forth. This was like, a good hockey fight where they just start going back and forth. And
well, I'll tell you, Jim, having watched the State House this closely for almost 11 years now, I don't think I've seen it go ping pong back and forth the way it did today. Typically it's just, each person gets their say and then they're done. This was Davis making his statement, Wilhauer responding, Davis then responding, Wilhauer having to respond again. It was kind of fascinating to see that. And I think that highlights where we're at right now in the overall conversation of priorities at the State House on the conflict that we're seeing between a state like Illinois and the Trump administration. And education definitely is one of those flashpoints. We could talk a little bit more about education with the governor pushing to ban cell phones in the schools. But before we touch on that, I do want to highlight a federal complaint that was filed this week against the Illinois State Board of Education. And this comes from Awake, Illinois. They're a social welfare advocacy group. They really kind of came on the scene during the COVID pandemic, pushing for parents' rights, pushing for students' rights when schools were being closed, and the various limitations that were put on sporting events, for instance. So Awake, Illinois, they went ahead and in front of the Illinois State Board of Education this week and announced that they filed with the U.S. Department of Education a federal discrimination complaint against ISB because ISB uses tax dollars for so-called affinity groups. And these are groups that are specifically designed and only for those who identify as a racial minority. So they can be together. So ultimately discriminating from somebody else who's not considered part of that group of people. So Shannon Adcock, the president of Awake, Illinois, went in front of the Illinois State Board of Education and announced that they have this federal complaint, a discrimination complaint, because tax dollars are being used to fund these programs, and tax dollars are being used for funding tutoring and leadership classes for other sets of potential teachers based on race. So we'll have to watch that too, because the State Board of Education would not give me a statement other than to say they can't comment on pending cases with this particular department at the U.S. Department of Education. So again, a lot of education flashpoints here in Illinois as we are in with Illinois in Focus. Talking with Jim Talamonte, another reporter with the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop. Jim, we heard the governor talk about a cell phone ban earlier this year during his State of the State and budget address. What's the next step here for that, you think?
Well, there is legislation now, and this is one move by the governor that actually, in terms of education, that has some popular support. A Pew Research study, and the governor quoted this, found that teachers identified, 72% of high school teachers identified cell phone distraction as a major problem in the classroom. And other studies have indicated that most parents would be supportive of this. There are some parents who would be concerned. There would be an exemption for emergency situations. Not sure how that would work in practice, because if teachers are collecting or school administrators are collecting cell phones and putting them somewhere so the kids can't use them during class, well, do you have time to retrieve it if a parent needs to reach their kid, or parents express some concerns, could we reach our kids? So I think the argument on this one is going to be as much about, is this an overreach by state government, an issue that should be handled by local school districts? And the governor's argument, and he had the mayor of Champaign supporting him with this, saying, well, this allows some flexibility for us, but it would still essentially ban cell phone use during classroom instruction. Not, kids could still bring them to school, so that if they're walking home, that kind of thing would still be. But although Deborah Finan, the Champaign mayor, and Governor Pritzker say, well, this is not a big government mandate. I think Finan actually used that term, and the governor said there's a local control. It would still force a ban. All public school districts would have to have a ban on cell phone use in the classroom, with some exceptions. And
I know there's people who have medical devices that are attached to a cell phone that may give them alerts if, say, a blood sugar is low or something to that effect. So I could see those types of carve outs, so to speak, right? Those exceptions. But Jim, I tell you, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of happy that I didn't have a cell phone with a video camera while I was in high school, because knowing some of the stuff that I did back in the day when I was a dumb kid, if that was easily accessible to post on social media, whoo boy.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I'm surprised more than 72% of the teachers don't want it, unless the ban applies to them too. Then it's a different story, right? So everyone loves the idea of less screen time, unless it's their own, right?
That's right.
Unless they hear that ping, like, oh, I have to, it's a nervous tick. I got to check.
I have to grab that phone. No kidding. So we'll see how that goes, because the governor did make that as a pretty prominent issue in the State of the State speech in February. We've got just a few more minutes here, Jim. Obviously, both you and I are watching what happens at the State House. We've seen all the debate, as we talked about, with education policy. But also you've got the ongoing concerns that some at the State House have about Elon Musk. We've heard some issues about renewable energy. We're in this season right now of the legislature where a lot of bills are moving through committee, not a lot of debate on the floor, but that's given some legislators some time on the floor to do points of personal privilege. Talk about some of the things you've read and seen that seem to be the priorities coming out of the State House.
Well, I think that, we've touched on some of them. Definitely another one would be transit. There was a committee hearing or two this week, I think one anyway, discussing this Metropolitan Mobility Act. It sounds like a big thing, but it would consolidate your Northeastern Illinois regional transit agencies into one. But it's not just that. It sounds great to eliminate bureaucracy, but there are all kinds of issues here. A lot of the proponents of this kind of legislation are wanting to put in equity measures that then some suburban lawmakers like Don DeWitt are saying, well, the suburbanites are being left out in the cold here. They're not getting any say about this. What about people in the suburbs versus all of this, where the power base is, the city of Chicago and Chicago Transit Authority. Metro has been the subject of all between mismanagement allegations and scandals going back to the Mike Madigan years. It's been almost, you could say, a cesspool of problems. And when I was doing traffic reports, the number of Metro delays, Monday morning, you could count on, there would be at least one delay. People didn't show up to work on Monday morning, taking advantage of that government paid time off, right? So there have been all kinds of issues with transit in the city. Some transit advocates and activists have been complaining long and hard about the CTA and issues there. There have been obviously public safety issues, especially on CTA trains. There's a whole lot of stuff going into this. So can our legislature actually drill down to something that's going to work long term? And is there money?
Yeah, no question. And of course, the taxpayer dollars available for all of this.
Fees and taxes. They're going to sneak those
$700+ million cliff. Yeah. So we'll be here at the State House and with Jim in Chicago, keeping an eye on what's up there at thecentersquare.com. You can get these stories and so many more. Jim, we've got a couple of crazy weeks ahead. The State House has bill deadline to get stuff out of committees next week on Friday, and then the real work is going to begin, where they're going to be pushing these bills out of the floor of either the House or the Senate. So we will be there watching this closely with the team with the Center Square. So very much greatly appreciate you joining here for the Center Square Illinois reporter, Jim Talamonte. I'm Greg Bishop, and listeners can keep up with all of these stories and more at thecentersquare.com.